we do have a responsibility. It is money that is the public's money. My name's Tony Dyer. I'm the leader of Bristol City Council and I represent Southfield Ward.
And hello, I'm Councillor Heather Mack. I'm Deputy Leader of Bristol City Council and I represent Lockleys Ward. And we're here today to answer some questions about what we're going to do and our priorities for the next year. I feel like I'm playing a game. I like games. So, Tony, what is the biggest challenge for Bristol City Council this year?
I think you're going to guess what I'm going to say. I mean, our biggest challenge is setting a balanced budget, because if we don't set that budget, we can't do any of the other things that we want to do. That is, in my view, our biggest challenge. It's not the only one, but it's the one that haunts me the most often, because if we can't do that, we can't do all the other things we want to do. How about you? What would be your biggest challenge?
Yeah, well, diving into that in terms of the financial challenge, but I think a lot of stuff around children's services, it's because a lot of our money is being spent on both children who need support, but also older people who need support. So that puts a lot of pressure on everywhere.
Yeah, you mean the social care budget, which is now 75-78% of our discretionary budget?
Yeah, which means we have very little money left
to do all the
to
other
spend
things.
on everything else, yeah.
What are the top priorities for Bristol over the next 12 months?
So we've already talked about making sure we're financially sustainable. So I think there's something there just about delivering the services that people expect, but delivering them well. We also do have a lot going on with transport. Some of those are difficult, but they are things that we need to do for the future. If we don't do some things that are a bit different with our roads, it's actually going to be really hard for people to get around.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems with transport is often, in order to fix transport problems or improve transport systems, it requires some disruption to begin with. And sometimes that's the difficult bit, is people have to go through some disruption sometimes of their travel. And it isn't until further down the line that they see the benefits from that transport being completed. I think the other thing I'd say in terms of priorities is Bristol's quite an old city, and a lot of the infrastructure, particularly around the harbour and the new cut, for decades there's been a lack of investment in it. And so we're repairing a lot of that infrastructure now. Bridges like Vauxhall Bridge across the new cut, Bedminster bridges, the walls of the new cut, which are starting to show severe wear and tear. And it is investment that we do need to make. But I think the other thing is delivering affordable housing. We have a housing crisis in Bristol. We have 22,000 households on the housing waiting list, and we do need to provide decent, proper accommodation for those people to move into.
Tony, how will council priorities help Bristol for the long term and not just this year?
Sometimes there's a habit for politicians just to look at what's going to get them through the next election. What we're trying to do, I think, is look at what Bristol needs longer term into the future. And if I look at some of the things that we're doing, the transformation programme, I think, is vitally important. We're investing large amounts of money, and that money is being invested in a way that is designed to both save our budget, to reduce our costs, but also improve the outcomes. Next question. How will the budget turn the council priorities into real improvements for residents?
We focus on sometimes small savings, but we don't necessarily look at everything that is being preserved as is or going up, spending as much again with inflation. And I think it is worth noting those. So libraries has been difficult, and we think the libraries are important parts of local communities. And we are preserving that libraries budget, which that doesn't mean we're increasing it, but actually to preserve it right now is quite hard. And I think that after this budget, we're expecting to have the most extensive library provision of any of the big UK cities. So that's something to be proud of. It might not be, some people might think we can do better, but actually it's taken quite a lot to keep the money for that.
Yeah, and I think the thing I'll add to that, and something that's been subject to quite a lot of debate, both in this budget period, but also in the previous one, is culture. And we all recognise that culture is an important part of what the city's life is, and it provides a lot of additional elements that make people's lives that much more interesting and enjoyable. But it's also something that there's almost no statutory funding for it. So what we're often facing is we have costs for children's and adult social care rising and increasing, sometimes at an exponential rate. And as you said earlier, that then squeezes the amount of money we have left for the things which are not statutory, which are, you know, where we have to make choices of. At some point, I want us to get to a position where culture doesn't have to worry about each budget coming along to see how much funding they're going to get, that they can have a stable, secure future going forward.
People want to know their money is spent well. How do we make sure every pound counts for Bristol?
Well, it's a reasonable demand as well. I think, you know, we do have a responsibility. It is money that is the public's money, and it's not our money apart from the taxes we ourselves pay. I think one of the things we're trying to do is to be as transparent as possible about where we spend that funding. I think the model that we have that we govern the city now, the committee model, does provide more of that, because you can see if you go along to one of the policy committees, you can actually see the decisions being discussed by all parties.
Yeah, I like to remind people that, you know, the money we're spending, it is taxpayers' money, it is money from people in the city. You quite often hear, for example, when we were talking about saving money on bin collections, we would hear people say, oh, they're trying to save their money, they're trying to save their council money. The money that we spend is everyone's money, and we're just trying to make it efficient for the best use that we think people in Bristol want. It's not like if we save money, we get to take it home. No. we don't get any extra money, we just spend it on something else that we think people really want or need in the city. And so I want people to be connected with how that money is spent, because it is everyone's money. And
no, they may not always agree with how we spend that money, but what we're trying to be as open and transparent as possible about not only how we're spending that money, but why we're spending that money in that particular area and at that particular time.
Yeah. Right. How will you make sure that the most vulnerable people are protected?
I think one of the ways we do that, and it also depends on the definition of vulnerable as well, because some people are vulnerable in different ways, and then they're not always fully recognised in some of the legislation. But in a lot of the areas where we do deliver key services along those lines, we are required to assess how we're delivering that, and that's also is then monitored by external bodies as well to make sure we are doing and delivering our duties properly. I think what we also have is Bristol is a very diverse city, and particularly in the environment that we're finding nationally at the moment, a lot of people who have come from overseas seeking sanctuary, looking for somewhere new, are feeling under threat. And I think we are doing a lot of work talking to communities, talking to different groups, to try and identify the best way that we can support them. And I think the other part of that as well is that with every decision that comes to a committee, it includes an equality impact assessment, so we can see what are the potential impacts of the decision that we're about to make. And sometimes there are decisions that we make that will have a disproportionate impact on some groups of people rather than others. And sometimes we do have to make a judgment call about whether that is still a decision that we want to go ahead, knowing that it will have a negative impact on one group of people, but will also have a massively positive impact for another group of people, because you can't always do one thing without it having a negative impact on something, even if it's an overall positive thing. How do you balance the needs of drivers with plans for a greener city?
So living in a city is complicated, and it is an ever-growing city, and we need to deal with the challenges about the fact it's an ever-growing city. If we didn't do anything and every new household in Bristol had as many cars, and actually most households are getting more and more cars, it would actually be really difficult with the road space we've got, and we can't have more road space. So there is that challenge, that there is something that needs to be done so that those people who are currently driving can still drive in a few years. So we do need to find alternatives, some sort of mass transit. For now, really good buses, because for a lot of people, their lives would be quite good for them if they can find other ways, rather than sitting in their own car for a while every morning, and maybe get into a bus or find another active way to travel if those options were good enough. So I think that's the thing. What we want to do is make those other options good, so that people are happy to make a different decision and relax on a bus for 20 minutes in the morning rather than getting to their car and being stuck in traffic.
The reality is there will be people who, for various reasons, partly to do with their jobs, you will need to drive a car or drive a vehicle of some point. And at the moment, those people you do need to drive are being stuck in traffic jams because they're unable to get anywhere, because there are quite a few people still driving who, if the bus service was better, if there was a mass transit system, or if we had better cycling routes, they might choose an alternative way to get to work, thus freeing up road space for those people you absolutely do need to be able to use the road. And that includes people who are disabled and need a car to be able to get around. Of all the major cities in the UK, we do have the worst transport system, and that goes back a long way to bad decisions or non-decisions being made, and it is something that we are willing to address and willing to tackle, because we need to. Otherwise, we're just going to have traffic jam after traffic jam after traffic jam, and nobody is going to be happy whether they're in a bus or in a car.
What makes you optimistic about Bristol this year?
About Bristol this year, I think there's quite a lot that makes me optimistic about Bristol. I think we came in as a new administration with a whole host of councillors who'd never won a city before. We also had a brand new system of governance which officers had never worked under before. And I think, yes, we had our teething problems, but I think we have delivered a lot. And in particular, we now have a sustainable financial structure. And yeah, I'm talking about finances again, sorry. And I think 2026 is a year where we'll start to see a lot of things come to fruition, both in terms of transport schemes being delivered, affordable housing being built, further improvements in our planning system, our children's services, our adult services, the standard of our housing that we have to look after. Our environment and sustainability plans will see further development. We will have adopted a local plan, and that will guide some of the development going forward. And also, I think if we look at some of the new areas that are being regenerated, and I think in particular Temper Quarter the area around Temper Meads, I think people are going to see things happening in that area now, where we are looking to bring forward a new town in the middle of our city and do it in a way that is an excellent approach to how we work with existing communities. We do want residents and local businesses to feed that information, to talk to us, contact the Bristol City Council. There are different ways in which they can ask questions or they can give us feedback. If you see a consultation coming your way, please respond to it. It does make a difference. We won't necessarily make the change that you personally want, but if enough people say they want a particular thing to happen, then as elected politicians, we are servants to the people and we need to respond. And even if we don't make the change, we need to explain why.
Yeah.
More coffee.